All right, so about a year ago, a friend of mine, and she's actually in the audience tonight as part of a coaching group, she sent off this email that had to do with eagle view. Who of you have ever heard of what an eagle does when a storm comes your way? See, I had never heard of it before, but it really catalyzes the statement of what it is that America stands for and really what our profession stands for. You see, each and every single one of us are sitting here today, and we've gone through something in our life that unfortunately either brought us one way or the other. It was determined based upon how you perceive that ordeal at that time. So the story goes as this. When a storm comes into your life, and I'm paraphrasing this, when a storm comes into your life, all the things run away, meaning birds, away from the storm except for one, the bald eagle. You see, the bald eagle is smart enough to realize that universal forces allow that eagle to spread its wings and go above the storm so it can get an eagle-eye view. You see, all the birds believe that that storm is something that's negative. The eagle has something within inside of its head that says, you know what, this is an opportunity, not a challenge. Each and every single one of you sitting there today has had challenges. And I want you to start looking at all the storms that are going to come your way as an opportunity to get an eagle-eye view of what's going on in your world, your life, and your practice. Because we all deserve to be the best version of us possible, correct? This is a quote that I'm a big sports fan, Joe DiMaggio, and this is what we have, and we're going to put it up in our office. There's always some kid who may be seeing me for the first time. I own my best. That touches my heart because when I was 12 years old, chiropractic saved my life. If it wasn't for the principled chiropractor who got my family to get me into the office, I wouldn't be here today. You see, I was sitting at the bottom of my basement stairs in my house in Jamestown, North Dakota, with a shotgun to my head. I was so subluxated that as I was sitting there, I had ammunition and guns spread out all over the place, wondering which one it was going to be. Not so much wondering which one it was going to be, but hoping someone was going to crash through the doors of my house to save my life. Because you see, I didn't want to be there. But nobody had a voice big enough to tell me or tell my family that there was another way out. And this past week in Fargo, we had a 28-year-old who did something that I was going to do. She couldn't handle her life anymore. So I ask you, what's going on in your life that you're too busy to get out and spread the message so that a 28-year-old, a 12-year-old, or a 2-year-old doesn't have their life saved by the hands that is yours that will create the most magnificent power and allow it to release innate, which is inside each and every one of us. You see, our profession, what I just learned about bamboos, these are bamboos. I believe our profession represents much of what a bamboo stands for. I didn't realize that a bamboo actually grows strength and deepens its roots on one side based upon universal forces. You see, if you actually dig up a bamboo, you'll find, and you'll be able to not even know where that plant came from, but you could decide whether or not the wind and all the universal forces came from one side or the other, because you'll actually see all the roots being grown within there. So how many things are going on in your life that you haven't rooted yourself deep enough to? Are you swaying? Are you staying solid to your foundation? I think we can learn a lot from universal intelligence. We can learn a lot from the universe itself. Billy D plays in the biggest church possible, and I love that idea, which has actually brought me to look at bamboo and the universe itself and say, how about we look at something that's not educated and just take it for what it is and learn for what that is? Now let's get into some really fun things. Each and every single one of us is sitting here today because there's men like this that some of us don't even know the story about. I quite honestly had no clue about this story. And so I was speaking in Palmer last week to a bunch of students, and I decided to contribute some money to them because I believe the school deserves it, and so does our profession. And I picked up this book. This is about Herbert Ross Reaver, the most jailed chiropractor. We all know that, right? Here's the one thing that I didn't know about it, is that he was more of a humanitarian than he was a chiropractor. You have to be somebody in order to do the things that he did. He wasn't a good chiropractor, which is why he went to jail. He stood for a principle. And that principle he stood for was a better life for everybody else. You see, he was one of the first chiropractors and first people to push the buttons on vaccination. We call that mixing, yet he was doing it way back then. I don't hear anybody yelling at him, telling him that he's a mixer because he was doing that. We remember him for one thing, stay in your lane, right? He had a principle of life, not just chiropractic. Each and every single one of you is a human being at heart, not a chiropractor at heart. You just became a chiropractor because your mindset's different than the rest. That's my personal belief. He was jailed 13 times in 11 years. On his 9th arrest, he actually decided to pay the fine and sit in jail. He had to sit, it was 1 day for every $3. It was a $25 fine at that point. We asked the question a lot, would you go to jail for chiropractic? Back then, $25 was a lot of money. Equate it to today, would you go to jail for $10,000, $20,000, or would you sit in it? Would you pay yourself out? You see, the first 8 times, he said, no way, I have to serve my community, so he paid the fine. Finally, on the 9th time, he says, you know what? No way, I stand for much more than this. They have to understand in this community that they're taking down chiropractors. And if there's a movement and they're wondering why chiropractors are in jail, finally we'll get freedom. You see, he could have bent and bended in the state of Ohio is where he practiced and taken his license. You see, they were licensed as chiropractors in Ohio, but they're one of the only states that had a medical board. So he decided not to be licensed because he believed the principle that chiropractors should tell chiropractors what to do in terms of regulation, not a medical board. And because of that, all of the chiropractors were licensed that they wanted to. Him and a couple other people kept running forward and said, not on my watch. We're going to make this a board. There's a principle. You're not going to tell us what to do. You didn't have our schooling, so why should we listen to you? B.J. Palmer is actually one of his great mentors, and he actually bailed him out of jail on his 10th time that he was arrested. And then the 11th time, he finally went in for 6 months. And in that 6 months, he wrote letters like crazy back and forth to his family, to the judge that put him in jail. His son wrote a letter to the judge telling him, you know what, if it comes down to it, I look up to my father. And if what he did is wrong, then I guess you're going to be putting me in jail. That's to paraphrase it. That family had some strong roots. I would say they're as strong as bamboo. Are you as strong as bamboo? That picture on your guys' right, that's him. They literally would have him, they called it the workhouse. He would go out into the community, and he only lasted out there 2 days when he was actually doing community service while in jail. You know why he lasted 2 days? It's because every single one of his practice members came and started petitioning, saying, get my chiropractor out of jail. Because of that, the courthouse and the actual jail said, we have to put him inside. So they actually put him into the kitchen. And they made him stay inside so nobody could see him. Yet they still had picketers, and they had people saying, no, get him out. Another great thing that you need to know about this man, other than just the idea of vaccinations and chiropractic, he stood up for prejudice. You see, when he was finally let out of jail the last time in Ohio, they said, if you were practicing one more time, you're going into jail longer than 6 months. So he moved to St. Petersburg, Florida. And in St. Petersburg, Florida, the reason I love history is we have to understand why these people acted the way they did. Why were they who they were at the times that they were, right? Because we don't have to deal with the stuff that they dealt with, whether it's chiropractic or prejudice. And he was one of the leaders in the movement of abolishing people to be prejudiced. They would actually take in anybody, no matter what color. His whole thing was, if you were blind, how would you see the world? That's how he lived his life. And I'm asking you, if you could not see, how would you care for your practice members? How would you care for your family? How would you care for yourself? I think our profession lacks a lot of self-confidence and self-esteem. You know, there's people that will get up here and they'll talk about money, and you can feel people sit down there in the seats and go, oh, they're talking about money. There are things that we need to lift ourselves up to and say, you know what? We deserve this. And we deserve it because these people went to jail for us. Why would they give up all their freedom for us to sit in a chair today, take a couple notes, go back home on Monday, and do absolutely nothing? So what's your why? I know mine. This little dude. You know, if I wasn't introduced to chiropractic, this little guy would not be alive. And I am for sure for that. We had a home birth. We did everything right. But as it has it, he pinched his own little cord. He actually was subluxated at the atlas. You see, the thing coming into it is I respected our midwife and doula. And I said, allow me to deliver my own child. I think it's the most precious gift of life. When two cells come together, 9 months later, there is a miracle that none of us can even explain, and we didn't even have to read a book. But yet, we don't tell that story. See, in our office, we start from the ground roots. Two cells come together. Mary, how don't you see what we're doing as we move forward? Two cells came together, that became life. Well, what was the power that created that? You guys know that story. Start from the beginning. Don't meet him at the end. This little guy comes out as blue as the sky. You see, the midwife, as the process was going on, I was looking at her and go, it was kind of those signals, kind of like a coach to a player. You just look at him, or your wife sometimes gives you that, and you just know to back off. She looked at me and gave me that look like this isn't good. And so immediately, because we had that prior conversation, I put myself into not being a midwife to deliver my own kid, but to be the chiropractor that I was born to be. Because I knew my kid's life depended on me. And when he came out, he was blue as blue can be, and he's going like this. His eyes are wide open, the most beautiful thing, and he's going for what seemed minutes. So I go up to his atlas. Sure enough, he's subluxated. Gave him a little torque adjustment, and the most beautiful gasp of air I've ever heard in my life. And he just immediately went right on to mom and started nursing. You see it? Thank you. Your why doesn't have to be my why. I had a bigger why before that, but now I even have a bigger why. If you're a student, if you're a doc that hasn't experienced some of this stuff, I faked it until I made it. We're getting filmed, I did. Because you know what? Somebody told me when they're speaking on the stage that a chiropractor has taken care of kids, and because a chiropractor had taken care of kids, I was a chiropractor, that was going to happen in my office. And guess what? We have an awesome, awesome office full of kiddos. And now we're going to have even more because this little dude, and that's my beautiful wife. So diversification, in my opinion, is an effect caused by a lack of purposeful clarity. Sorry, I'm losing a little bit of saliva there. And DB, so I tagged myself on that one. I'm alive, and I gave myself my own quote. So I heard Pat Riley talk about LeBron James as this. He said he's the boat. Thank you. He said he's the boat. And as I was listening to that, I'm a big sports fan, so I'm watching ESPN, and it was all full of basketball. I'm not a basketball fan by any means, so I had to figure this out real quick, so I turned off ESPN, and I looked it up, and it was best of all time. So I got to thinking, are you on the verge of becoming the best of all time? Are you even close to it, or do you even want to be? You see, Herbert Ross Reaver didn't set out to be the best of all time. By default, because of who he was, what he became, and what he did, and what he stood for, I believe he's one of the best of all time. Would you guys agree or disagree? And as you're sitting there today, I want you to sit back and go, am I going to be the captain of a boat, or am I going to be a passenger? Because the rest of the profession can push you around, or you can actually be thrown to the wolves and come out leading the pack, as we've all heard. You see, 2 years into this profession, I was thrown to the wolves because another chiropractor didn't believe that how I practiced was the right way to practice. He ended up being the actual president of our state board. I hate politics, but I had to get involved. So that's why when Sharon explained that I run an EPOC group, that's one of the reasons. And one of the reasons when Gilles asked me to come and speak, it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with this is a bigger EPOC group for me. This is a group of brothers and sisters that when I leave here, I can look you in the eye and say, I gave it my all. Now it's your choice to look up above and say, would Dee, BJ, Herbert Ross Reaver, Sigafus, Gold, all the greats look down at me and say, what I did today was the best possible version of myself. You see, we just did a remodel in our office, knocked out several walls. We've always been open, but now we're open as ever. And on our remodel, it's taken us 2 months to find the pictures that we want. It's going to be jailed chiropractors. It's going to be everything that was back in the 30s and 40s, because I want my community to know why I can stand in front of them and be so free and do what I love doing. And they need to know where it came from. You think that in the military, if they didn't know what had happened in World War I and World War II, that they wouldn't be as good as they are today. Some of the best soldiers are the ones that actually understood what happened, the sacrifices that took place in order for them to stand in that uniform today. And I'm asking you, in your uniform today, do you understand the sacrifices that truly were made? I'm just on the beginning of the process. I don't know exactly where that is, but I can tell you what, it gives me goosebumps. So these guys, some of you guys might be sports fans, some of you not. Could you possibly say that these people are known specifically for one thing and one thing only? They did not diversify. They stood true on a principle. Whether it was Wayne Gretzky was true to himself about hockey. He did not try to play basketball. Michael Jordan tried to play baseball. He's not known for baseball, right? Phil Mickelson, love or hate any of these guys, they do one thing and one thing only, and they get paid billions and billions of dollars combined over their lifetime, right? Why don't we take that same philosophy? My philosophy is learn from people that have come before me. My philosophy on life is the idea if someone's done it, I want to learn about that, and I want to make less mistakes than them. These people have such a clear vision of their life that they became the best of all time in their own sports. You see, Wayne Gretzky, I'm a big hockey guy. What I love about Wayne Gretzky, and this is going to bring you guys to another level, he actually played sports, hockey, with people always 5 years older than him. Not because he was so good, because he wanted to push himself. And where does that come into balance with you guys? Are you willing to surround yourself with people that are doing better? Are you willing to stand on a stage and speak to a community, not because it's about you, but because your community deserves better? Are you willing to be judged and forget about it anyways? You see, these guys were. Michael Jordan remembers all the shots that he missed, but he's known for the clutch, how many times that he actually made that shot down the stretch, and he got paid for it, and they gave him the ball at the end. So who's going to fill their shoes? You see, just recently, as you all know, Sigafus just passed. And each one of us are sitting here. Who's going to be the next one to step up? Hopefully, it's this whole room. Hopefully, you can look yourself in the mirror and go, I don't know what he was talking about, but I need to make a difference. Because if you don't step up, this little dude in the middle is never going to have an opportunity to walk into your office. That little dude had every single disease you could think of, was on every single drug for the first 2 years of his life, walked into our office, we told him the straight, honest-to-God truth, and within 2.5 months, he was walking at the age of 2, he was completing sentences, and he is as vibrant as ever. And because of we are so willing to stay principled to what it is that we do as chiropractors, we kept telling the story in our office. And I get invited to the NICU more than I'd actually want to be invited there for. And the reason is why I don't want to be invited. Why would you want to see a kid in that situation? But you know what? I was just talking to Dan Sullivan at lunch. We were talking about we need this and this in the profession. We need people to understand and see exactly the power of the adjustment. Don't give up on any story because of where somebody's at. If they're in the NICU, keep saying it and be their best friend and show up. Now, to me, that's ethical because if I didn't get in there, those little kids aren't coming out. Or they're not coming out as vibrant as where they're at that point. And the last one that we just went in was born 3 months early, had no time moving forward in terms of coming out of there. They said 2 months. 3 months later, within July 3rd at 7:57, I remember this thing, of this year, I went in and put my hands on that atlas because the kid's laying like this. I didn't x-ray. I didn't do a scan. I ethically walked in and said, I am here for the right reason. Luckily, her boyfriend is named Dustin, and my first name's Dustin, so it kind of worked out well for me to get in there. If we're recording this, just don't show it to the state boards. What I'm saying about this is the idea that stayed principle to what it is that you know is best. Because after that, she was eating 15 milliliters per feeding 3 times a day is it, with feeding tubes. 2 days later, the mom reports to me, 45 milliliters per day. This is after already being in the NICU for a month. Medicine was keeping her alive, but not letting her survive. You get that? She was not thriving anymore. She was stuck at a place. She needed help. She needed Nate to be on the job even better than where it was. It needed to be expressed. And then 4 days later, that little baby's out of the hospital. A month and a half earlier than what the medical profession predicted. Why? Because they think that the medicine's finally kicked in. Thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it and love you guys.